This episode of Lawyers Tell All is brought to you by Law Firm Conversions. If your law firm's phone is ringing, that only means your marketing is successful. It's what happens when the phone is answered that will drive your success or failure. Visit www.intakeacademy.com and claim your free copy of Chris Mullen's groundbreaking book for lawyers and law firms that gets every call converting to become a profitable client, showing you the steps you need to take to ensure the right person is answering the phone and answering it correctly. Welcome to the Lawyers Tell All podcast, where Chris Mullins, the preeminent sales and communications consultant in the legal industry, shows you how it looks through lawyers' eyes. Here, innovators in the trenches provide powerful insights that help you connect with new clients, handle the sometimes harsh realities of the legal profession, and embrace the mindsets needed to succeed. Be sure to visit our website at www.lawyerstellall.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, lean in, tune in, and let's take a deep dive.
Hello, everyone. It's Chris Mullins with Lawyers Tell All, and we have another interview. This interview is with Mark Bello, and I'm going to let Mark interview and do his own bio with you. Go ahead, Mark.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Super. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
I practiced law for almost 45 years. I also, during that time, had a lawsuit financing company called Lawsuit Financial, where we helped plaintiffs get through the litigation process with financial assistance. But early in my career, I handled a case against the Catholic Church where a couple of young boys were molested by a priest. And this goes back to the 70s and 80s, before the scandal became well known. And I became one of the first attorneys to handle that type of case. The church treated my partner and I very poorly. They treated the judicial process and the legal process very poorly. They resisted discovery. They covered up information. They hid witnesses. They did everything you could possibly do to behave poorly in the legal system. And ultimately, we got everything we were looking for. We pursued the case to a conclusion. We got a very nice conclusion for the clients in a very bad situation. And I'm in my 30s back then. I'm 70 today. And I'm saying to myself, this is perhaps the worst case and the worst defense behavior I've ever seen. I should write a book about this someday. Mm-hmm. And I sat down one day and I started to write, and I'm probably in my 40s, 50s maybe. And I put it away and I started again, and I put it away and I started again. And life gets in the way. You know, I don't need to tell you what, or your listeners, what the practice of law requires. Mm-hmm. On top of that, I have a family. I have 4 children. Now I have 9 grandchildren. Wow. So I'm raising my family. I'm practicing law, and there's really no time to write a book. Mm-hmm. Well, fast forward, I'm now 65, 66, and I've got this outline of a book. And I want to write, originally I wanted to write a nonfiction book. And I thought, okay, their behavior was so abhorrent, I'll write a fictional account and embellish the hell out of it.
Okay.
So I wrote how it felt rather than how it was. And how it felt was that there was some CIA type organization behind the scenes controlling the narrative and making witnesses go away, hiding them, sending them to other states and what have you. In the book, they become a clandestine organization called the Coalition, and they will hide things by any means possible, including murder and things like that. So it's without question an embellished version of the factual situation, but it does describe how it felt. It felt like I was involved in this cover-up conspiracy by an organization behind the scenes. Anyway, in about a year, I finished a novel called Betrayal of Faith after a 45-year plaintiff personal injury practice, and wrote my first novel and published. Since that time, I've written 7 more adult legal thrillers, and 2 children's books, and a Jewish cookbook, of all things. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. If you want more details about my practice, I'm happy to do that. But what I'm doing today is writing books.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I like your storyline, so that's really great. And I noticed when you talked about your grandchildren, there was a little smirk there. So I'm sure that they're your pride and joy.
Let me tell you about my.
Right. I do.
Let me tell you about my grandchildren.
I do the same exact thing. Okay, so tell me a little bit about your practice. Like when you had your practice, what was that like? What was the most difficult of running a practice, and what was the best part of running a practice?
Well, this case I just described to you was the most difficult case of my practice. Not because they're difficult cases, although back then they're more difficult than they are today because the scandal was not well known. They were hiding, lying, cheating, stealing, covering up. They were just doing the boring things that you wouldn't expect from a respectful religious institution.
Mm-hmm.
And we were the bad guys trying to stick it to the church. Forget the fact that the archbishop is covering up, or the cardinal is covering up, or the priest is a pedophile. Forget all that.
Mm-hmm.
The lawyers who are bringing them to justice are the bad guys. So that was the most difficult case of my career. It didn't need to be so, but it was. My practice was this, I'm going to use the term garden variety, a garden variety personal injury, auto accident, premises liability, product liability, medical malpractice type law firm at the time. Back in those days, you could handle a medical malpractice case before all the changes in the law, the so-called tort reforms that we've experienced in our business, as a subspecialty. These days, you can't do that. If you're going to handle malpractice, you got to handle malpractice.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, in the 70s and 80s, you could handle a malpractice case or 2 here and there, and still handle a general personal injury practice. So we dabbled in, for lack of a better way to say it, medical malpractice and what have you. But the way this case came about was, of all things, a premises liability client whose case I settled for less than $10,000 referred me this clergy abuse case of my career. So it's funny how, and I'm sure your listeners can appreciate this, it's funny how you get these kinds of cases from those kinds of cases.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting story all by itself. I'm not sure I answered your question, but I'm not sure I recall it either.
No, you talked a little bit about your firm, and I mean,
what was my practice about? It was what you would call a typical personal injury practice.
Mm-hmm.
We had a volume practice. We were in court all the time. I used to. It's a young man's game. I used to be in 5-6 courtrooms in a morning, and not always in the same building, and not always in the same county. So,
Right.
so you're driving all over the place, and you're managing a practice. And we had several associates, and we did a nice job for our clients.
So would you recommend that attorneys continue to be attorneys or be authors?
That's an interesting question. I made a lot more money as an attorney than I have as an author, which is one of the reasons why I make these podcast appearances. I'm trying to build, if you will, an author career.
Right.
It is tough, much tougher than I expected, writing and marketing books. From the standpoint of what I like better, I much prefer writing and marketing books than I did practicing law, for the reasons I gave you. Aside from the law being a young man's game and requiring travel, hustle, bustle, etc., it's also an abusive profession. You spend most of your time fighting with people. You're either being beaten up or beating somebody else up. If you're fighting with your opponent, if you're not fighting with your opponent, you're fighting with the judge. If you're making your opponent happy and the judge happy, you're not making your client happy. And it's difficult to, be in conflict all the time. Having said that, I wouldn't have chosen any other way. I enjoyed what I did. I enjoyed what side I was on. I could not be on the side of preventing what I'm going to call justice over a technicality, let's say. I couldn't be that person. So I'm not being critical of any of your defense listeners. They have a role to play and they have a job to do, and a lot of them would say, I couldn't represent somebody who's abusing the system the way plaintiffs do, or looking for jackpot justice. I know all the cliches, but I couldn't be on that side of a case. So while I painted a negative picture, again, as a young man, I enjoyed what I did. I enjoyed, for instance, the end result of the big case I described to you. I enjoyed bringing them to justice. Yeah,
but it's a lot to put yourself through and your family through, right?
Yes. It was. What was disappointing about it was the way they behaved. What we should have done is sat down. By the way, this priest had been criminally convicted of his behavior before the case was even brought in civil court. So why were they being so evasive? The answer was because a priest vows an oath of poverty, has no money, and you can pursue him to your heart's content. What we wanted was compensation from the church. And they claimed, and it wasn't true, they claimed no prior knowledge of his vicious propensities. And there was plenty of prior knowledge. It was just being covered up. And that's what was so disappointing to me.
So what got you to decide to be an attorney? I know that was a long time ago, but what was it?
To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm being a little facetious, but okay. You see Perry Mason, you see Matlock, you see Atticus Finch, and you see them working miracles to get justice for their clients. Now, you and I both know that the actual practice of law isn't like that. It isn't dramatic or Oh, I don't know. I don't want to say it's not fulfilling, because it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it just doesn't happen the way it happens on television.
Mm-hmm.
As a Jewish boy, my mother and father um, always um, demanded, for lack of a better way to say it, that we get a good education. Offered the phrase that a solid education is the ticket to a good career.
Mm-hmm.
So education was always important to me. Being a professional was something that they wanted of their children. Uh, they wanted me to become a doctor.
Yeah.
The problem was there was science and math, and I didn't do well in science and math. So I did very well in English literature. I did very well in the social sciences. Um, I was a student of the Constitution. It made sense for me to become a lawyer. Uh, I don't know if that answers your question, but I wanted to be a professional, and lawyer was a good fit for me.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've never been sorry. Uh, but I will say, as I said earlier, it's a hard
Yeah.
way to make a living. And I don't think I'm saying anything that your listeners wouldn't agree with.
So one of the things that I'm confronted with a lot in my profession is the mental health issues of attorneys and team members. It's, I think it used to be that dentists were the top number one for suicide. And I don't know if it's still accurate, but it wasn't that long ago I heard now it's attorneys. And so just with regards to mental health, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you even talked about how difficult it is and the abuse of it. And it seems to be a real issue, a real challenge for attorneys, not just attorneys, but.
Well, I can't speak to anybody else but myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've known a lawyer or two who has taken his own life.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say why,
Right.
nor do I know. Um, my attitude would be that let's talk about it in the context of burnout.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not surprised that lawyers leave their profession and suffer from what we call burnout.
Mm-hmm.
I did that. I left and went into the legal finance business, as I indicated. Why someone would go as far as taking their own life, I think, is much less related to practicing law than it is to their personal situation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, frankly, that there's a correlation between suicide and the practice of law. Having said that, certainly the practice of law, as I indicated too many times now,
Mm-hmm.
that it's a difficult profession.
Yeah.
And maybe someone who is prone to being dissatisfied with their life
Mm-hmm.
to the extent that they might do something as drastic as that
Mm-hmm.
might mean that they've chosen the wrong profession and ended up doing what you're describing. But I'm also surprised, because I'm hearing it for the first time from you, that would be true of a dentist.
Mm-hmm.
That's surprising as well.
Yeah.
It seems to be so easy to transition to something else,
Right.
rather than take that drastic
Mm-hmm.
of a step.
Yeah. I guess, like any profession, like you're saying, it more probably is focused on the individual in this situation and
I think so.
their personal life. But still, if it is one of those businesses that lend itself to the abuse and all the stress and everything. Not that others don't, but we're just talking about law firms right now that I don't know what they teach in law school, but it would be great if they really focused on all of these real life things that happen to help
Yeah.
help when
Well,
the very beginning.
there's so many reasons why somebody commits suicide, though, that are unrelated to, let's say, work stress or anything related to work. I had a first cousin who jumped off a building, the ninth floor of a building, and killed himself. And his primary mental illness was his dislike for his appearance. So what could be more appropriate than jumping off a building and smashing your face? And the reason I share that story with you isn't to, recall the pain or criticize him. He was mentally ill, but I share the story because there's a lot of reasons to commit suicide that are unrelated to the kinds of things we're talking about.
But if we set aside the suicide part, just the stress and the challenges of being an attorney, whether it's your own firm or working at someone else's firm, it would be nice, I think, for young lawyers if there were some type of support and conversation at the level of law school so that they can start to get prepared and ready and help themselves early, not because of suicide, but just the stress of it.
Well, I agree 100% with that. I think law school fails lawyers in a lot of ways. Law school prepares you for nothing related to practicing law. It simply gives you the degree that enables you to do it. That's my belief. I don't feel that I was in any way, shape, or form prepared to practice law in 1977 when I got out of law school. I learned how to practice law by practicing law.
Right.
And again, your listeners can chime in by writing to you or however they interact with you. But law school provides you with a piece of paper that permits you to. I've got it here somewhere. Anyway, a piece of paper that permits you to practice law. That's another way it fails, is preparing you for the rigors of the practice of law, the challenges of practicing law,
exactly.
and the mental distress that practicing law presents. Having said that, there are, for practicing lawyers, many different places to go if you're having trouble.
Right.
There's, this for lawyers and that for lawyers. If it's alcoholic, if it's an alcoholism problem, there are lawyer groups for that. If it is a substance abuse problem, there are substance abuse centers for lawyers or outreaches for lawyers. If it's mental health issues, there are facilities and support groups for specifically for lawyers in those areas. And I would encourage anybody that's having these types of problems to find and utilize those services through either the local or national bar.
Yeah, and it's important to do it not just for yourself, but especially if you have your own practice, you have your team members that are also struggling because of the kinds of calls that they handle every day, all day long. And so you can't really be there for them if you're not able to figure it out for yourself.
Yep. No question.
Yeah. What would be the best recommendation you would have for an attorney, whether they're brand new at it or they've been doing it for years? Just what you learned when you were practicing. What would you say?
Be the best you can be.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, it's kind of a trite little limerick, if you will. The three rules of criminal law apply to me, every facet of law. And the three rules are: get the money up front, the client does the time, not you, and get the money up front.
Right.
And while that sounds silly, it's not always important to get paid, but it's important. Sometimes it's important to do nice things and the right thing, regardless of whether you get paid. But it is always important to remember that the consequence of the case is a consequence that the client suffers much more so than you do.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would advise any attorney is to never forget who the boss is and who the employee is.
Right.
And there's a lot of arrogance in our profession, and attorneys tend to forget who the boss is, who they're working for, who's working for who. And to me, it's important to remember and humble yourself, if you will. Even if a client isn't making much sense to you, even if their need to be heard seems silly to you, this is the most important thing in their life right now.
Yeah.
It's just another case to you. And I would suggest to any lawyer out there that they remember that just another case to you is the most important event in the client's life.
Well said. Well said. Definitely very important for everyone to remember and to figure out how they have to remember it every single day. Let me ask you this: are there any
every single case,
every single case, every single day, every single person that you speak to, all of them? But are there any books that you're working on right now that you want to tell everybody about?
I'm actually working on my second children's book. I've written 8 legal thrillers. There are social justice thrillers about things that have happened in real life. I pull my topics from the news: a school shooting, a cop on black person shooting, a sexual harassment in the Me Too movement, white supremacy, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I've written about things in the news, how the legal system, both criminal and civil, might handle it, and what an appropriate society-based outcome should be. That's been what I've worked on. I wrote a children's book recently called Happy Jack, Sad Jack, a bullying story about a biracial kid who's bullied in kindergarten. I'm following that up, and that's what I'm working on now with a book about distracted driving and a kid who gets into a car accident or who's in the back seat of his parents' car that gets into a car accident as a result of the negligence of a distracted driver. People have said to me, well, aren't kids too young for these kinds of messages, bullying and car accidents? I mean, come on. And my response is, and I would ask you, if you don't teach a kid in kindergarten what bullying is and that it's wrong, mm-hmm. how do you expect him not to be a bully or be bullied when in the 6th grade? Mm-hmm. A. B. If you don't teach a kid to tell his mother or father to put down a phone
Yeah.
while they're in the back seat, if they're not precious enough to that parent to not use their phone, to not be so addicted to a phone,
Mm-hmm.
that kid, that kindergartner, that first grader, second grader, is going to own a phone. You and I both know this.
Mm-hmm.
His parents are going to get him a phone, or her,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps at age 8, 9, 10. Okay. When do they take driver's training?
Yeah.
16, 17, 18, right?
Right.
Okay. By the time they're 16, 17, and 18, they're addicted to the phone, just like the
Yeah.
adults are.
Yeah.
And they're very likely, even though driver's training tells them not to, they're very likely to pick up the phone while they're driving.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to teach kids to tell their parents to put down the phone and to not use the phone as early as kindergarten, just like I did with bullying.
Mm-hmm.
I think these are important messages to deliver a small child. And that's what my children's books are about. I call them safety, social justice kids books.
That sounds wonderful.
So I write children's in the same way, if you will, that I write adult novels with a message that I think is age appropriate.
Yeah, I think it sounds wonderful. It sounds great. Sounds like it should be a training class too, with all the put the phone down. So absolutely, my daughter got,
Put down the damn phone.
yeah, she got my grandchildren phones, and I was like, oh no, I was
Well,
not happy about that. But
I often suggest to my wife that if she had a choice between her phone and me, she'd dump me in a second.
oh no.
She disagrees, but that's how addicted she is to her phone.
Oh no.
I don't think she drives with it, but she'll text at a light. Somebody will honk the horn and tell her to go because she's texting. That's less offensive to me than actually moving while texting.
Yeah.
All of your auto accident lawyers out there
Yeah.
are cringing at this discussion. The momentary distraction caused by a phone and the reaction time required to recover from it if an accident's about to happen is remarkably small. You don't have enough time to recover from taking your eyes off the road if you're about to get into an accident. And that's the big issue with distracted driving. You got it. It's not just phones. And car manufacturers are complicit in this.
Sure.
It's all the navigation devices, radio, fancy electronics in your car, makeup, food, coffee. You name it. It's all there to prevent you from doing what you're there to do, which is pay attention to what's in front of you and prevent people from getting hurt.
Well, thank you very much. Very enlightening conversation. And how can everyone get in touch with you?
They can find me at markmbello.com. That's markmbello.com. All of my books are available on Amazon. I'm around. If you Google my name, you'll find me.
But they have to make sure they put the M in.
Yes, markmbello.com.
Yeah.
My mother would be very upset if you didn't have the middle. I'm named after my maternal grandfather, and they called him MM.
Oh,
so the M is important.
Awesome. Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone, with Lawyers Tell All, and we'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Lawyers Tell All. where Chris Mullins takes you on a journey with lawyers in the trenches who show you the realities of what it takes to succeed in this chaotic, crowded, ever-changing profession. Remember to visit our website at www.lawyerstellall.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on Lawyers Tell All.